The blood moon hung low over the desert, casting everything in a crimson glow. Clara stood at the edge of the sand, lantern in hand, watching shadows stretch across the barren landscape. A woman's cry pierced the night, carried on the wind like a spirit seeking rest. She turned toward the sound, her weathered face half illuminated by the flickering flame. The old prophecy whispered in her mind. One will bring life, the other, words of the past. Her grandmother had spoken those words to her decades ago, on a night just like this one. Clara adjusted her shawl against the desert chill and began walking toward the distant lights of the village. The blood moon followed, watching. Clara's adobe home sat at the edge of the village, its walls the color of sand and time. Inside, dried herbs hung from wooden beams, filling the air with sage and rosemary. Shelves lined the walls, crowded with glass jars of roots, leaves, and powders. A collection of worn books stood beside her bed, medical texts she'd traded for or been gifted over the years. She moved through her home with practiced ease, fingers brushing against the spines of books, the cool clay of jars. On her mantel sat faded photographs, her mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, all midwives who had served this desert community before her. Clara was the last of their line. The villagers called her La Curandra, though she preferred simply midwife. For 40 years, she had guided new life into the world, her hands gentle but firm. Those same hands had closed the eyes of the departed. The women trusted her, the men respected her. Children brought her wildflowers and stones they found beautiful. Clara lived alone with her memories. Her own chance at motherhood had slipped away years ago when the fever took her husband and unborn child. That loss had shaped her like water-shaped stone, slowly, persistently, until the original form becomes something else entirely. She was preparing her evening tea when the knock came. 3 sharp raps against her wooden door, urgent in their rhythm. Clara set down her cup and crossed the room, bones aching with the coming storm. Elena and Tomas stood on her doorstep, the young couple clutching each other against the rising wind. Elena's belly protruded beneath her dress, her face drawn with exhaustion and worry. Tomas held her upright, his eyes pleading. "Please," he said. "The doctor in town said he can't help us. The babies, they're coming early." "Babies?" Clara stepped aside, ushering them in. "Twins," Elena managed, her voice strained. "I can feel them fighting inside me." Clara guided Elena to the bed in the corner while Tomas paced nervously. Outside, the wind picked up, howling around the corners of the house like lost souls seeking shelter. Dust rattled against the windows. "How long have you been having pains?" Clara asked, placing her hands on Elena's swollen belly. "Since yesterday," Elena whispered. "But different now. Sharper." Clara felt the movement beneath her palms, strong, insistent. 2 distinct patterns. The babies were indeed coming, and soon. She looked into Elena's eyes and saw fear there, but something else too. A knowledge that went beyond words. "The blood moon," Elena said, glancing toward the window. "My grandmother said children born under the blood moon carry old souls." The wind moaned louder, as if in agreement. Clara felt a chill run down her spine, remembering the prophecy again. In that moment, she knew these children were meant for her to deliver, that her path and theirs had been set long ago. "Rest now," Clara told Elena, helping her settle more comfortably. "I'll prepare what we need." As Elena closed her eyes, Clara moved to her shelves, gathering supplies with practiced efficiency. Clean cloths, scissors, string, her mother's silver bowl for water. Her fingers lingered on an old wooden box pushed to the back of a shelf. Inside lay a silver rattle, tarnished with age, the one she had crafted for her own child who never drew breath. She added it to her collection, though she couldn't say why. Tomas watched her from the corner. "Will they survive?" "The doctor said twins rarely do out here." Clara met his gaze. "I've delivered many children under harder circumstances than these. But the blood moon brings change," she finished. "Nothing more, nothing less." The storm intensified as night deepened. The blood moon climbed higher, its light seeping through cracks in the shutters. Elena's labor progressed quickly, her cries mingling with the wind's wail. Clara worked steadily, wiping Elena's brow, checking her progress, murmuring encouragements. Tomas held his wife's hand, his knuckles white with tension. The room grew hot despite the cool night, sweat beading on all their faces. Clara felt herself slipping between past and present, remembering other births, other nights when life hung in delicate balance. She remembered her grandmother's hands guiding hers as she learned to feel for a baby's position. Her mother showing her how to ease a difficult birth. Her own child, never given the chance to fight for life. The memories swirled around her like desert dust, settling into the creases of her consciousness. Elena screamed, her back arching off the bed. "They're coming," she gasped. "I can feel them." Clara positioned herself at the foot of the bed. "Push when I tell you," she instructed, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions within her. "Breathe now. Push." Elena bore down, her face contorted in agony. Outside, the wind suddenly died, leaving an eerie silence broken only by Elena's labored breathing. The blood moon's light streamed directly through the window now, bathing the room in crimson. "I see the head," Clara announced. "Once more, Elena. Push." With a final, guttural cry, Elena pushed. The first baby slid into Clara's waiting hands, a girl with a shock of dark hair and lungs that worked immediately, her wail piercing the night. Clara quickly cleared her airways, tied off the cord, and wrapped her in a clean cloth. "A daughter," she told the exhausted parents, placing the crying infant briefly on Elena's chest. "But we're not finished." The second birth came faster. 3 pushes and the boy arrived, smaller than his sister but perfectly formed. Clara waited for his cry, but none came. His eyes opened instead, dark eyes that seemed to hold the desert's depth. And then, impossibly, his tiny mouth moved. "The circle returns," he said, the words clear as crystal in the quiet room. Clara nearly dropped him. The voice wasn't that of an infant. It was aged, knowing. It was her grandmother's voice. Elena gasped. Tomas crossed himself. Clara stared at the child in her hands, who now began to cry normally, as any newborn would. Had she imagined it? The phrase echoed in her mind, the same words her grandmother had spoken on her deathbed. With shaking hands, Clara finished her work, cutting the cord, cleaning the boy, wrapping him in a blanket. She placed him beside his sister on Elena's chest, watching as the new mother's tears fell onto her children's faces. "What were those words?" Tomas whispered. "Did you hear it too?" Clara nodded slowly. An old saying, "Nothing to fear." But fear had already taken root in her heart. The prophecy was unfolding before her eyes. The hours after the birth passed in a haze. Clara helped Elena nurse the twins, showed Tomas how to swaddle them properly. The blood moon began its descent, the crimson light fading to orange, then gold. By dawn, Elena and the twins were sleeping peacefully. Clara sat at her table, unable to rest. The boy's words, her grandmother's words, haunted her. The circle returns. What circle? What was returning? She moved to an old trunk in the corner of the room, unlocking it with a key she kept around her neck. Inside lay her mother's possessions, a shawl, a wedding ring, a small leather-bound journal. Clara had never read it, honoring her mother's privacy even in death. But now, something compelled her to break that silent promise. The journal's pages were yellowed, the handwriting tight and precise. Clara flipped through entries about weather, village gossip, births and deaths. Then a passage caught her eye. Twins born under the blood moon. The girl cried. The boy spoke words from beyond. The village fears them now. I must protect them as my mother protected the others before. Clara's hands trembled. She read further, discovering that her mother had delivered twins under a blood moon, as had her grandmother. Each time, one cried while the other spoke. Each time, the speaking child brought messages from the past, warnings, prophecies, secrets long buried. And each time, the village eventually turned against them. Clara closed the journal, her mind reeling. She looked at the sleeping family, Elena and Tomas, their twins nestled between them. Innocent now, unaware of what might await them. The boy stirred in his sleep, tiny fingers flexing. What burden did he carry? What memories lived within him? Days passed. Elena regained her strength. The twins thrived, the girl loud and demanding, the boy quieter but watchful. Clara kept her discovery to herself, observing the boy for any sign of strangeness. He seemed normal enough, until the third night. Clara was changing his wrappings when he looked directly into her eyes and spoke again. "She waits beneath the mesquite tree," he said, his infant voice carrying the timbre of an old man. "Your child. She never left." Clara nearly collapsed, her knees buckling beneath her. 20 years ago, she had buried her stillborn daughter beneath the ancient mesquite tree at the edge of her property. No one knew. She had told the village she lost the baby at the hospital in the city. "Who are you?" she whispered to the child. His only answer was a gurgle, his eyes now those of a normal infant again. When Elena and Tomas prepared to return to their home the next day, Clara found herself reluctant to let them go. "Stay another week," she insisted. "The babies are still so small." "We've imposed enough," Tomas said, though Clara could see the relief in his eyes at her offer. Their home was small, their resources limited. Another week of Clara's care would give them time to prepare. That week stretched into 2, then a month. Clara taught Elena how to care for the twins, showing her remedies for colic, techniques for soothing them to sleep. All the while, she watched the boy, whom they had named Miguel, for signs of his strange ability. He spoke 3 more times, always when alone with Clara. Once, he recited a prayer her father had whispered to her as a child. Another time, he described the pattern of her mother's favorite shawl. The 3rd time, he simply said, "They will come for me, as they came for the others." Word spread through the village about the twins born under the blood moon. Visitors came bearing gifts and curious glances. Clara intercepted their questions, deflected their concerns. But she saw how they watched Miguel, how they crossed themselves when his dark eyes settled on them. Elena noticed too. They whisper about him, she confided to Clara one evening. They say he's not natural. People fear what they don't understand, Clara replied, but the worry had taken root in her as well. The journal entries described how previous speaking children had been ostracized, even harmed. One had been taken away by frightened villagers, never to be seen again. The turning point came when Father Domingo visited. The elderly priest had baptized most of the village children, including Clara herself. He came bearing small wooden crosses for the twins. As he leaned over Miguel to place the cross around his neck, the boy spoke. "You buried her without last rites. You know she was innocent." The priest stumbled backward, his face ashen. Everyone in the room froze. Elena, Tomas, Clara. Miguel began to cry normally, as if nothing had happened. Father Domingo crossed himself repeatedly. "Dios mío," he whispered. "It's true." "What's true?" Tomas demanded, moving protectively toward his son. "The devil speaks through him," the priest said, backing toward the door. "This has happened before, generations ago. A child who knew things no infant could know." "He's just a baby," Elena cried, gathering Miguel into her arms. But Clara saw the fear spreading, infecting the room like a disease. Father Domingo left without completing the baptism, promising to return with holy water and additional prayers. Clara knew what would follow: suspicion, isolation, danger. That night, after Elena and Tomas had fallen into troubled sleep, Clara sat beside the twins' makeshift cradle. Miguel's eyes opened, finding hers in the darkness. "You must choose," he said in that ancient voice. "As your mother chose." As her mother chose. "Choose what?" Clara whispered. "Between what is easy and what is right." The following days brought exactly what Clara feared. Villagers stopped visiting. Those who came for her remedies refused to enter if the twins were present. Father Domingo returned with 2 other priests, insisting on performing a special blessing, one Clara recognized as the first step in an exorcism. Elena and Tomas grew frightened, not of their son but for him. "What should we do?" Elena asked Clara, tears streaming down her face. "They say he's cursed. That'll bring misfortune to the entire village." Clara thought of her mother's journal, of the cycles repeating through generations. She thought of the mesquite tree and what lay beneath it, of choices made and unmade. "Pack your things," she told them. "Tonight." Under cover of darkness, Clara led Elena and Tomas from her home, the twins bundled against the desert chill. They followed a path known only to Clara, one that skirted the village and led toward the mountains in the distance. "There's a settlement beyond the pass," Clara explained as they walked. "People there are different. They come from many places, bring different beliefs. They won't fear what they don't immediately understand." "But our home, our family," Tomas protested weakly. "Your family is with you," Clara said firmly. "Your home is wherever they are safe." They reached the ancient mesquite tree as dawn broke over the desert. Clara paused, placing her hand against its gnarled trunk. Beneath its roots lay her own child, a daughter who never drew breath, a life unlived. Miguel stirred in his father's arms, his eyes finding Clara's across the distance. For a moment, she thought he might speak again, reveal her secret to his parents. Instead, he simply watched her, an ancient soul behind infant eyes. Clara reached into her pocket and withdrew her mother's journal. "Take this," she told Elena. "Read it when you're settled. It contains the history of children like Miguel, special children born under the blood moon. It will help you understand what he is, what he might become." "You're not coming with us?" Elena asked, suddenly understanding. Clara shook her head. "My place is here. I must stay to protect the next ones who will come." "How do you know others will come?" Tomas asked. Clara smiled sadly. "The circle returns. It always does." She embraced them each in turn, pressing a kiss to the foreheads of the twins. To Miguel, she whispered, "Live your life. Speak your truth. But remember to be a child first." His tiny hand grasped her finger, a gesture so normal, so human, that tears sprang to her eyes. Clara watched them continue down the path, becoming smaller against the vast desert landscape. When they disappeared from view, she knelt beside the mesquite tree and began to dig with a small trowel she had brought. The earth was hard, unyielding at first, then softening as she reached deeper. When the hole was big enough, she placed something inside, not her mother's journal, which was now with Elena and Tomas, but the silver rattle she had made for her own child. She covered it with earth, patting the ground smooth. "The circle returns," she whispered to the desert wind. "But perhaps this time, it can be different." Clara rose, brushing dirt from her hands. The blood moon was long gone, the normal cycle of sun and stars restored. She turned back toward the village, toward her home and the life she had chosen decades ago. A life of service, of standing between worlds, between birth and death, past and future, fear and understanding. In the distance, she thought she heard a child's laughter carried on the wind, bright and clear, followed by a softer voice whispering secrets only the desert would keep. Clara smiled, feeling the weight of generations on her shoulders, but also their strength flowing through her veins. The prophecy had been fulfilled. One had brought life with her cries, the other, words from the past. What came next would be written by new hands, lived through new hearts. Clara had done what she could, broken the cycle of fear, sent the children toward a different future. She walked steadily back toward the village, the rising sun warming her face. There would be questions, accusations perhaps. The villagers would want to know where Elena, Tomas, and the twins had gone. Clara would weather their anger as she had weathered everything else, with quiet dignity and the knowledge that she had chosen what was right over what was easy. The desert stretched around her, harsh but beautiful, unforgiving but honest. Like life itself. Like the choices we make and the consequences we bear. Clara touched the key around her neck, the one that had unlocked her mother's trunk, her mother's secrets. Now it was just a key again, its purpose fulfilled. In the village, a woman would soon enter labor. Another child would need guiding into the world. Clara's hands would be there, steady, skilled, compassionate. The work continued, as it always had, as it always would. Birth and death, joy and sorrow, woven together like the strongest fabric. The circle returns. But circles can be widened, their paths altered. Clara had learned this truth from Miguel, from her mother's journal, from her own life of watching patterns repeat and sometimes, just sometimes, change. She reached her home as the village was waking. Already, a young boy was running toward her, his face urgent. "La Carandra, come quickly." "My mother." Clara nodded, gathering her shawl around her shoulders. "I'm coming," she said, and stepped forward into the new day, leaving footprints in the desert sand that the wind would soon erase, but the earth would remember.